guys, how you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July reading wrap up. So I know this is coming out a little bit late, but I went on vacation at the very beginning of August and I didn't have time to film this before I left, so I'm filming it now, so I'm sorry that this is so late, but I hope that you still want to see it. Anyways, so July was an okay reading month. I didn't really love anything that I read. I loved a few things, but overall it's just kind of like a meh reading month. The reading rush happened in July. I have a reading vlog for up on my channel. If you want to go check that out, you can. I'm not going to talk about too much in depth of some of the books because I feel like I already talked about them enough in the vlog. But yeah, let's just jump into this wrap up because I feel like it's going to be a little long. So the first book that I read was Stranger Things Worlds Turned Upside Down. Well, this is basically a book all about seasons 1 and season 2 of Stranger Things, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. Basically just talks about like the making of the show, behind the scenes information, and talks about the characters in the show. It's just like, oh Steve. It's just like a really beautifully made book, and I read this to get myself hyped and ready for season 3, which dropped on July 4th. I really enjoyed this book. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed learning more about the show and kind of the history of it before it was made and as it was getting made, and kind of like all the behind the scenes information. I just thought it was really fun. But I also just love like the design of this book. I like how it looks like an old battered library copy. I just like the formatting of it on the inside. Part of it is upside down, like this middle section here is upside down, which I thought was really clever and really funny, but overall, like, I just really loved the book. I love books like this and books that are like behind the scenes and giving information on how the show was made. I really enjoy reading things like this. I'm super happy that I read this before watching season 3. It was just so much fun. If you guys are a fan of Stranger Things and have not yet read this book, what are you doing? Go to your library, go to the bookstore and pick it up and read it because it is such a fun read. Naturally, I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. The second book that I read in July was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This was for the Mass-along, which is low-key cancelled. Me and Peyton have just really been struggling with reading this series and keeping up with it and keeping up with live shows and all of that jazz. It's just been really hard for us to kind of force ourselves to read books that we're not in the mood for. If you guys don't know, I'm never in the mood for high fantasy, so trying to force myself to read a huge chunky high fantasy every single month was just really difficult, so we've decided to cancel the Mass-along. I'm sorry if you guys are like following along with us, but that's what we had to do. I'm thinking of continuing on with the books on my own and trying to finish them, but I just don't know if I'm going to manage to be able to do that with all the other books that I want to read, but I am going to try. But anyway, so Queen of Shadows is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series. If you guys don't know, it's basically a series about an assassin. In the first book, she's like competing to become the king's champion in blah. The series is so different at this point that that's pretty irrelevant, but that's what the first book is about, at least, and there's magic and hot fae and stuff like that. It's a good time, sort of. I'm kind of conflicted about how I feel about Queen of Shadows. This was my favorite from the books that I had read from Throne of Glass to this one. This was my favorite. And I'm just kind of conflicted because I did not love it as much as I did the first time. This book starts out pretty slow for a long time, and it takes a really long time to get into it, and it was really hard for me to start enjoying the book. Like, this book is fat, okay, and it was really hard for me to get into it. And about halfway through the book, I started to get really get invested. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of enjoying this now, woohoo, and then it kind of slowed down again, and I was like, oh my god, what is happening? So I obviously did not enjoy this book as much as I enjoyed it about like 4 years ago when I first read it, but overall it's still my favorite out of the series. I would say it was still like the most enjoyable for me to reread in this process, so probably still like my favorite in the series so far, but I'm just kind of annoyed that they're so big and so slow paced. I feel like if you're going to make a book this big, you need to make it more fast-paced and more, like, action-packed, so I'm not just sitting here bored and not caring about what's happening. I do like the characters, specifically Aelin and Adian. Rowan is starting to grow on me a bit more. but I'm still not like obsessed with Rowan. Manon, I liked her a bit more in this book compared to Air of Fire, but she's still not a favorite. I'm hoping that changes going forward because obviously she's a point of view in the book, and so I would like to enjoy her chapters more. Overall, this book wasn't the worst, but it's also not the best, so unfortunately I gave it a rating of 3.75 out of 5, which is a downgrade from the 5 that I originally gave it. This mass along and this reread has been so disappointing, and I'm so sad that I'm not loving the series as much as I originally did. But let's just move on because I hate talking about it. A lot of the books I read this month I actually don't own. So this next one is Elsewhere by Gabrielle Zevin. I actually listened to this on audio, and this was kind of like an impulse listen and impulse read because I wasn't really planning on reading this book, but I saw that it was available on my Overdrive app and I wanted to listen to something. And I have read a Gabrielle Zevin book before, The Memoirs of a Teenage Amnesiac, and I used to love that book in 2014. I wanted to read this one. If you don't know what it's basically about this girl who at the beginning of the book dies, and she doesn't know that she's dead at first, but she ends up finding out. And she wakes up on this like boat and she's going somewhere. She doesn't know where she's going, and she ends up in this place called Elsewhere, which is kind of like the afterlife, and you kind of get to have this like new life in Elsewhere. But things work a bit differently in Elsewhere. You age down, so whatever age you die at, you age down. So I think she dies when she's like 16, so then she'll become 15, 14, 13, and when you get down to a baby, you are shipped back to Earth to start a new life as a baby, and then obviously the whole cycle continues. So that's kind of how Elsewhere works. So she's brought to Elsewhere, and she is kind of like not happy about being there, obviously, because she's so young and she died, and so she doesn't really want to be there, and so she is having like a hard time adjusting. So that's kind of what this book is about. That was a really bad description. I'm sorry, I've never described this book before, but yeah. Didn't really enjoy this book, like, at all. I don't know if part of it was because the narrator was really annoying. The way that she voiced all of the characters, it made them all seem very juvenile. Even like the adult characters, like there was a grandma in this book and she seemed so childish, and it really, really bothered me. Just the way that the narrator decided to voice these characters really bothered me, with the way that she would use tone with them. Especially our main character, she sounded like a baby, and it really bothered me because she's 16, she's not a baby, and that just kind of really annoyed me. Also, the characters in general were just dumb and annoying, and I didn't like any of them. Like, I didn't like a single character in this book, which normally, like, even if I don't like a book, maybe I can find like at least one character that I semi-enjoy. I did not like any of these characters. I had no feelings towards them. I didn't care what happened to them. I wasn't invested. I just did not care about them at all. And then there was a romance in this book that I really felt like was unnecessary, and it kind of creeped me out because the person that our main character ends up being in a relationship with is like much older than she is. Realistically, like, I know that when you're in Elsewhere you age down. So they were like 30, they're in their 20s or 30s when they died, and then he aged down. So he's now like a couple years older than she is in Elsewhere age. But like, he still has more life experience than she does. He is, in mind, older than she is. And so I don't know why, but it kind of like creeped me out and gave me like the wrong vibes. I don't know if I'm wrong there to be feeling that way. But because he was so much older than her when he died, and like just because he's now like appearing like he's like 17, 18, I don't think that makes the relationship okay. I don't know if that's just me reading too much into it, but I was really creeped out by it, and it also just like wasn't a good relationship to begin with. It felt really random to me and really weird and really unnecessary. I think the book should have focused more on our main character. I don't remember what their names are, to be honest, but I feel like the book should have focused more on our main character and her journey and Elsewhere, as opposed to making her fall in love with this random guy that just didn't make any sense. The only part of this book that I actually really enjoyed, which made it earn the star rating that it got, which I'll tell you guys in a second, is I really enjoyed the world and the idea of Elsewhere. I'm very interested in the idea of like reincarnation type of thing, like you get a second chance at life when you die. So I like the idea that there's this Elsewhere in this book that you get to go to, and when the time is right you get to go back to Earth and start a new life. I like the idea of that, and so I really enjoyed the world in the book, and I really enjoyed learning more about it and kind of exploring that idea of being reborn into a new life when you die. But overall this book sucked. Just something that was easy to listen to, something for my ears to experience, but like overall this book sucked and I do not recommend it whatsoever, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The only reason it got that 2-star is because, like I said, of the world and how I was intrigued by the idea of the book. But the execution was awful, so don't recommend. Fourth book that I read was another audiobook, and it was A Little Something Different by Sandy Hall. This was another very impromptu book, and it was really interesting. It's another contemporary book, basically telling the story of these two people who should be together, but they aren't together. They just can't seem to take that step to talk to each other and get together, but everyone around them sees that they should be together or think that they're together. And so the book is told in 7 or so different point of views, and none of them are the two main characters. So none of them are the guy or the girl who should be in a relationship. It's all the people that are experiencing and seeing them from afar, or their friends. There's even a point of view from a squirrel on a bench, which I thought was really, really weird and really useless, but kind of interesting at the same time. I don't really know. So that's kind of what the book is about. It's kind of about all these people watching them and observing them and being these people should be together. Yeah, I didn't really have much to say about the book. I thought the premise was quite interesting. I liked the idea of the story, and I thought that I was really going to enjoy this book just based off the summary. But I don't know, I just wasn't invested in the characters. I think maybe it's because we weren't really in their heads. We were just seeing them from everyone else's perspectives. I thought that was, it was an interesting idea. I just felt like it didn't work for me personally to be connected to the characters with it being told that way. Yeah, overall the characters were bland and very, very forgettable. I don't remember their names. I don't remember any specific things about them. So they just felt very bland and kind of just they enter my brain and they go right back out the other side when I close the book. They're not characters that are going to stick with me. Like I said, I've already forgotten them. So I'm a character-driven reader, so if I don't like the characters or if I don't remember the characters after reading, then that's probably a bad sign for the book. Again, the narrator for this book just wasn't the best. I don't like the way the narrator is. There's two. I don't like the way they narrated the characters for the most part. Some were kind of interesting, like the squirrel. I really liked the voice they did for the squirrel, but besides that, it was, again, kind of just annoying. Overall, this book wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't a very memorable book. It's not something that's going to stick with me, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars because I did have a relatively good time while listening to it, but it's just nothing that really stuck with me. Okay, the next 2 books I'm going to kind of talk about together because I bought the same author. So I read the ebooks for Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. These are 2 separate poetry collections by this poet, and they were really hyped up in the community, and people love them, or they think they're too overhyped. And I just kind of saw them when I was browsing on my Overdrive app, and I was like, you know what, I'm kind of intrigued in getting into modern poetry, so why not just read them? And they're obviously really short, so I decided to read them, and overall I thought they were good. I think I liked The Sun and Her Flowers a bit more than Milk and Honey, because for me poetry is all about relatability, and if I can't relate to a poem, even if it's well written, if I can't relate to it, then I'm probably not going to enjoy it. I like to relate to the poetry that I'm reading, so I found just more relatable poetry in The Sun and Her Flowers. Rupi Kaur was I think she's a good poet. I would rather hear her read her poetry. I always think that's more impactful, especially since she has a lot of spoken word poetry. I feel like hearing her read it would be much more intriguing and much more interesting, and would make me like it more. If they can make me feel something, then I'll enjoy it. So also I feel like reading them in ebook form was the wrong move because the formatting was a bit off, and so there were times where it was kind of hard to tell what poem was what because it just kind of all looked like the same thing. So I feel like reading it physically would have been a bit of a better decision, but regardless, didn't impact me too much. I feel like I don't really have anything to say about them. I also decided not to rate them because I don't really know how to rate poetry. I don't know how to go about doing that, so I decided to just not rate them. So there are no ratings for the Milk and Honey or The Scent of Her Flowers. Now we're getting into the reading rush, which I read 4 books for. So because I did a reading vlog for them, I'm not going to talk about them too in depth. I just don't feel like it. If I'm being honest. So the first book I read was Dear Martin by Nick Stone, and I'm gonna just read the back too because I don't even care. This is a good kid, an honor student, always there to help a friend, so why is he the one in handcuffs? It basically just deals with the whole topic of like Black Lives Matter and like police brutality and just what it's like to be a black person in our society, and I thought it was really interesting. Obviously I tabbed a lot of it. I enjoyed reading this book. It's not my favorite book I've ever read. I feel like if it was longer, I would have enjoyed it more. I feel like I just have a harder time connecting with shorter stories. But yeah, obviously I really enjoyed that this touched on so many important topics, and I thought that I did it really well in a really good way. The important topics that it kind of mainly dealt with were like police brutality, white entitlement, privilege, etc, etc. I felt like there were a lot of really good conversations in the story, but in general none of the characters were that memorable to me. There was one character that I really enjoyed in the story. Yep. Overall, it was an enjoyable book, but not a favorite by any means. I gave this one a 3.85 out of 5 stars. And then I read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. This was another audiobook. I was never actually planning on reading this book. I thought that I was like done with John Green, like just rereading The Fault in Our Stars and I'm good. But then I saw that it was available. And I was like, you know what, why not? I've heard that it has good anxiety representation. I don't know how to describe this book, so I'm not even going to try. But look it up on Goodreads. I don't really know how I feel about this book, if I'm being completely honest. I have no idea. I feel like my favorite thing from this book, and something that I really appreciated, was the anxiety representation. I felt like it was done really well, and I could relate to it a lot, so that is something I obviously appreciate in books. If you have a good anxiety rep, automatically it's like, thank you, good in my books. But overall, I just wasn't connected to the characters or the story really at all. I also didn't find myself invested in the plot at all. I feel like most of the book was more character driven than plot driven, but like overall I really wasn't connected to any of it. Like I said, the only thing I really enjoyed was the anxiety representation. So, but like I didn't dislike the book at all. It didn't stick with me, and I wouldn't want to own it, and I wouldn't want to reread it, so for that I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And then we have Every Day by David Levithan. I hate this book. Just gonna say it, I hate this book. This is basically about our main character, A, and every morning they wake up in a different person's body and kind of have to navigate through their day, and then at midnight swap into a different person's body. So it's kind of just about them going through their everyday life until one day they're in this person's body. I think his name is Justin, and he has a girlfriend. And so A, while in his body, is with the girlfriend, and they end up falling for the girl Rhiannon. And every day from then on, they try to find Rhiannon and talk to Rhiannon, and end up falling in love with her. And it's dumb. This book sucks. I literally wrote, the first line of my review is, this book is just one big oof. I talk about this a lot in my Reading Rush vlog, so I don't want to get into it too much here, but there was a lot of problems with homophobia that like I felt, I don't think it came from the author necessarily. I think it was just more the character who was like low-key homophobic. There's also fat phobia in this book that I really hated. I think that boils my blood the most, is the fat phobia that's in this book. I just really did not enjoy. There's just too many negatives in this book, and I just don't want to talk about it anymore. So I gave this book a 2.85 out of 5, but honestly it probably deserves less than that, but this book was trash, so goodbye. 10th book that I read is The Love and Lies of Roxana Ellie by Sabina Khan. This is probably one of the better books that I read in the month of July. This book is basically about our main character, Roxana Ellie. She's a closeted lesbian, and one day her mom catches her with her girlfriend, and her mom isn't accepting of it, and so her mom kind of makes up this plan to get Roxana to go to Bangladesh with her. So basically she makes up this like lie that her grandma is sick and they have to go to Bangladesh to take care of her, and like be with her before she dies. So Roxana goes, and then her mom is basically trying to keep her in Bangladesh and trying to put her into this arranged marriage and try to like get the gay out of her, which is awful. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really, really well written. I thought the characters were fun. It was a really emotional read, but it had like a really heartwarming ending, but just know this is like not an easy book to read in terms of like, you know, the sexuality and her trying to get her mom to like understand her and all of the homophobia that comes from her parents. And there's also a trigger warning for a sexual assault in this book that's talked about a little bit via some diary entries from a character, so just know that going into it, if that's something that you're triggered by, just to know that it's in here, and if it's going to bother you, maybe don't read it. I enjoyed learning more about the culture, even though I didn't love the way that her parents treated her because of their ideas with their culture and how they thought that it would be perceived. But overall, I really enjoyed learning about the culture and being in Bangladesh. I thought that was a really fun setting. I've never read anything set in Bangladesh or a place like Bangladesh, so I really enjoyed that. Sometimes I did feel like the pacing was a little bit slow, but I don't think it really bothered my enjoyment overall of the story. But besides that, like, I really enjoyed this book. I really don't have issues with it. So I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the 11th book that I read was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child by J.K. Rowling, John Tiffany, and Jack Thorne. This was a reread for me, and I actually filmed an entire vlog of me rereading the script, so I'm not going to talk about it really here because I'll talk all about it in the vlog, and it's going to be a long one, so definitely check that out when it comes out. But this was a reread for me, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, although I'm honestly thinking of giving it a higher rating, more like a 3.5 or like a 4, because I had a really fun time reading it. So definitely check out that vlog when it's up, because I don't think it's going to be up before this one, but I read Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And the last book that I read in the month of July was Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is a really cute graphic novel that is really hyped up on BookTube right now, but I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was really, really cute. I thought the relationship was adorable, the writing was really good. I really liked the art style as well. I thought it was just like really, really adorable. But overall, like, I just have a hard time connecting to graphic novels, and I don't know if it's because we just get their dialogue and there are like no descriptions, but I just have a hard time connecting to graphic novels if I don't have some source material beforehand. And I do know that the main characters in this graphic novel do appear in Alice Oseman's book Solitaire. It's like side characters, and so this is kind of like their origin story of the relationship. And so I feel like maybe if I were to read Solitaire, I would maybe feel more connected to these characters, but I'm not entirely sure. But I definitely enjoyed this graphic novel. I thought the relationship was cute. I was definitely rooting for them to get together and to have like a cute relationship, and I just thought that this was really well done. I definitely can understand some of the hype around it, but like I said, graphic novels in general are just harder for me to get into and appreciate and like connect to. But overall, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. That was my July wrap-up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, give it a huge thumbs up. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys read in July, if you participated in the reading rush, or what you did in July. Subscribe if you have not yet already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!